Hello and welcome back to the Jet Press Podcast. My name is Justin Freed, and I'm joined as always by my man Mike Luciano. Mike, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, even though it's been a while, the Aaron Rodgers euphoria is still there. Now that there's only, I think, 75 days left till opening day, I still get that warm, tingly feeling down inside. It's just making me feel good that I finally got a quarterback. So let's dive into this Jet Press episode. But before we do all that, you could find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it may be that you get your podcasts. We are all over the podcasting interwebs. Make sure you go and leave us a review on Apple, especially. I don't know what it is, man. It's swear it's not for ego. It's for the business side. Apple loves those reviews, man, that algorithm. So if you want to support the show, that's a good way to do it. Also, make sure to find us over on YouTube at the Jet Press. That's where you can subscribe and get the whole back catalog of everything we've done. So let's go right into a surprisingly busy week because there have been some more rumors surrounding the Jets, of course, with Dalvin Cook, the hot name, the belle of the ball in terms of free agency. Well, it's him and DeAndre Hopkins kind of co-billing right now. The Jets have pretty much said from very early on that DeAndre Hopkins is not happening. We both have wanted DeAndre Hopkins to happen. We both think he'd be a fantastic addition and really a game changer for a team that's trying to win a championship. Doesn't seem like the Jets want to do that for whatever reason. Money, fit, who knows? They don't want to do it. So the next big name on there is Dalvin Cook, who is still an incredibly productive running back, even though Minnesota decided to part ways with him. Well, he's aging and there's things like that, but Dalvin Cook is still a really high-end running back in this league. And Tyler Conklin also agrees with that sentiment. Tyler Conklin, the Jets tight end, of course, came over from Minnesota, who blocked for Dalvin Cook for years and years and years. He wants Dalvin Cook, saying that there is, quote, plenty of room available because we got room for whoever wants to come and help us win a Super Bowl. That's what he said on Good Morning Football the other day. And the Cook thing, me and Justin have incredibly different opinions on the Dalvin Cook thing, I think. Now, I'm in the pro Cook camp just because I know they got Brees Hall and I know they got Michael Carter, who will come up later in the show, and Israel Abanikanda, who I'm really high on as a running back. I get that's a crowded running back room as it is. And in 2023, sinking that much equity, for lack of a better word, into your running back room may not be the best way to spend all your money, but very rarely is a player like Dalvin Cook, who's just going to turn 28 years old. That's not like he's 37. It's not like Frank Gore at the end of his career, as Jets fans remember, or Adrian Peterson bouncing around between different teams at age 35. That's not what this is. This guy's still a 1,000-yard receiver, 1,000-yard running back, pretty firmly, I would say. 1,173 yards last year, and he's had at least 1,100 in 4 straight years, including a 1,500-yard year in just 14 games in 2020. So that's just not a high-end running back production. That's almost elite running back production. And he got that with a Vikings offensive line that really was all over the place. They had a couple good individual players, but collectively it just never really seemed to click. So I think that if you get him to like an Aaron Rodgers, where he's got, I think, an equal offensive line, or at least one that has the potential to be better than what they got in Minnesota. Aaron Rodgers, all these weapons, a coach in Nathaniel Hackett, who, for all of his flaws, has typically had a good history with running backs and getting production out of running backs. I think that's a pretty good fit, personally. And I'm glad that Tyler Conklin is keeping the pressure on the Jets, especially now that they have, I believe the most recent betting on this all, they're plus 350, which makes them the favorites among all the AFC teams out there, NFL teams out there even, for Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just because it's like June and there's not a lot going on, but it does seem like the Jets are kind of, not the Jets necessarily, but Jets players are going like all on full court press to try and recruit Dalvin Cook here. We saw it with Odell Beckham. Obviously, we saw it with Aaron Rodgers. Though it's had different outcomes, of course. But yeah, you are right. I see the situation a little bit differently than you. I think I see the running back situation very similar to how I see the Jets wide receiver situation. But the issue to me is I just think DeAndre Hopkins is a significantly better player and moves the needle a lot more than Dalvin Cook does at this stage. It's not that Cook's a bad player by any means. Let me get that straight. I think I've made that clear, but I don't know. I don't want anybody to twist my words, misconstrue what I'm saying. Dalvin Cook's still a good player. Like, he's still a good player. He's had 4 consecutive years of 1,100 yards or more on the ground, 4 straight Pro Bowls, which, the Pro Bowl doesn't mean a ton, but it still means something. So he's a good player, right? And I get totally why the Jets are interested in Dalvin Cook. seeing that Brees Hall is still working his way back from the knee injury. They hope he's going to be ready for week 1, but there's no guarantee. In fact, I would be surprised if he's given a full workload early on in the season. And you have some questions with the running back room. While there's potential there, I also really like Izzy Abanikanda. I think he could be very good. And the Jets seem to believe that he can contribute early. There's questions about Michael Carter. There's questions about Zonovan Knight because Carter had a disappointing sophomore season with the Jets. Zonovan Knight flashed and then kind of tapered off later last year. Now, a lot of that was because the Jets' offensive line was very beaten up, very injured by that point, so they weren't really given much to work with. But I totally get wanting to bring in a player like Dalvin Cook. Given his experience, given his production, it makes sense. The issue in me just comes down to what I think he's going to get. Now, I could be wrong. But the report, at least that came out earlier in the offseason, I believe it was actually earlier this month, was that it was from Tom Pelissero, said that Dalvin Cook is looking for a significant contract in free agency. He's not looking to sign a contract worth even $5 to $6 million. He's looking upwards to $8 to $9 million a year, which to me, you just can't pay that for Dalvin Cook. You can't pay that. That's legitimately, I think, borderline, if not top 10 running back money, because that's what running back salaries are like right now. So I think paying anything close to that would be ridiculous. I don't think the Jets would do that, first of all. I think that they're interested, but they're clearly always interested at their own price point. We know how Joe Douglas operates. We know how he works with these things. He's not giving Dalvin Cook $9 million a year, so I'm not concerned about that. The issue is I just think there's going to be teams out there willing to pay more than the Jets. Maybe that's the Miami Dolphins. Of course, Cook has experience in Florida, so it would not be a surprise if he wanted to go back home to Florida. There's other teams out there as well that are interested, maybe even like the Patriots, right? Getting some depth behind Ramondre Stevenson. There's other teams that will definitely have interest in Dalvin Cook, and I think those other teams will be willing to pay more. So unless Dalvin Cook is willing to take a discount to come to the Jets, which maybe he is, the Jets have kind of become somewhat of a ring-chasing team, right? Like they're kind of like the Bucks of the past. They're a team that, hey, they have a short Super Bowl window, but that window's legitimately very open. They can contend for the Super Bowl this year if all goes right. And teams, or I should say players, see that. Dalvin Cook, maybe he's one of those players. Maybe he comes to the Jets and is willing to take a 1 year, $4 million contract with incentives. If that happens, I'm on board. Like I think 4 million is probably what I'm capping it at. I wouldn't want to go anything much more than that. I just don't know if he would take that. So that's kind of my issue with Dalvin Cook. I don't think he moves needle as much as DeAndre Hopkins does. So I'm not willing to go out of my way to try and, offer him a big contract that's going to exceed everyone else's deals. But I'm not surprised that all the Jets are interested. And I wouldn't be upset if they signed him to the roster as long as it was for a reasonable contract.
Now, two points I want to go branching off of your argument here. Number one is Dalvin Cook is worth more than $4 million as a player to me personally. So now double digits, that's a little expensive, but there's got to be a happy middle ground. And I think the longer this goes on, the more it benefits the Jets because officially that price tag, or at least what Cook is asking for, is going to get whittled down and down and down. And then maybe he'll come to some sort of middle ground with the Jets because he's not a guy who's just going to sit out the whole year. He's not going to Le'Veon Bell this. He could ruin his career if he does that. So he's going to play next year. Number two, I'm glad you brought up the other teams because I can't remember if this is the exact out, but I remember looking at where he's projected to go. And I believe if you take the Jets out, the other three top teams are the other three AFC East teams. Mm-hmm. And they all have a need for him. I mean, Buffalo has Damian Harris. They just signed in free agency. But, I mean, Damian Harris lost his starting job. He's no guarantee. James Cook was not overly impressive. His brother. Think about that, though. What if he wants to join his brother with Buffalo?
Really fun. That would be really cool.
That's something there. New England always loves having a bunch of backs. Ramondre Stevenson and Cook could be one of the best in football, and they're just going to run the football until everybody just gives up physically. I mean, that could be really deadly, especially for a team that I think has a little bit of a limited quarterback and a limited offensive structure. Getting him could really vaunt them up and make them, I think, a playoff team. And then Miami, the obvious one, Florida guy, Florida State alum, need at running back. I mean, Raheem Mostert's banged up. Devon Achane is, I think, a little too skinny for every down in between the tackles work. He's like 180 pounds. I mean, that makes a ton of sense, and that's a legit difference maker because New York and Miami, in my opinion, are not too far apart. If Miami gets a guy like Dalvin Cook, I mean, I don't think it'd be outrageous to say that could make Miami potentially better than the Jets or maybe the best team in the AFC East, depending on how good you think Buffalo is. I mean, these are not insignificant variables. So the Jets have to be aware of the fact that if they let Dalvin Cook leave or they pursue Dalvin Cook and they don't end up with him, they got to be prepared for him going to a rival in a year where they are neck and neck with a lot of their big rivals. That could really change the scope of the division.
Do you want my hot take really quick about Dalvin Cook in a specific AFC East team?
Okay, let's hear it.
I think that Dalvin Cook would be the third best running back on the Miami Dolphins,
Behind Mostert?
behind Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson, because Jeff Wilson
Dude.
legitimately really good last year. I'm not even, dude.
No.
Listen to me here, okay? Production wise, you're looking at Cook's production. 1,100 yards again last year, 4.4 yards per carry. He was really good. Efficiency, he ranked near dead last in almost every single analytic. He was not nearly as good as his production would indicate. I'm not saying that Dalvin Cook is bad. I'm very high on Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. I think they got a really good running back to him. I think he's obviously worse than Ramondre Stevenson at this stage. He'd be the second best running back on the Patriots. He'd also be the second best running back on the Jets. And probably the best running back on the Buffalo Bills because they don't really have much there. Look, as a fantasy owner of Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris, I don't want him going to either of those teams. But I genuinely think he'd be the third best running back on the Miami Dolphins. Maybe that's a crazy statement. I know it sounds crazy.
Jeff Wilson and him are like the same age. So
Jeff Wilson was actually good last year. Like
Dalvin Cook.
He ranked dead last in yards, rushing yards over expected in the entire NFL.
That's the stat I just can't get behind.
I know that that's just one stat, but there's other analytics out there that show he wasn't as good. He's also ranked among the league leaders in fumbles and drops over the last 4 years. I would say this. He's always had those issues with fumbles, with drops. He's had some durability concerns, but he's been able to make up for it with his rushing ability. But last year, his efficiency plummeted. He was not a very efficient running back. And so maybe it's just a down year. It happens with running backs sometimes. Obviously, he wasn't helped out by a not so great Vikings offensive line. But maybe it's also because he's had a ton of mileage, a lot more than Jeff Wilson, by the way, a lot more mileage than Jeff Wilson. And he's 28, so he's going to turn 28, I think, in like August or whatever. Maybe it's a sign of things to come with running backs who have that much mileage. Generally, that's what happens. They start to hit a cliff. And I think we already saw that cliff with Dalvin Cook last year. That's not to say he's bad, but I just don't think we're ever going to get anything remotely close to what he used to be. So I'm projecting essentially when I say that if he goes to the Dolphins, he would be their third best running back. That's my projection when I say that. I think he will be their third best running back.
Mostert's also 31 and has some serious injury problems too. So if you're
right,
mileage,
but he was also really good last year. Like, yes, you're totally right, and he's also a real. I'll say this: I do think that Cook would be a good fit in that offense.
Oh yeah, totally. Like that offensive line of Mike McDaniel, totally.
I think he'd be a really, really good fit with Mike McDaniel's offense and in that offensive scheme alongside Mostert and Wilson, who are both very good fits. But to me, I think of the teams in the AFC, the Dolphins have the least need for Cook, and that includes the Jets because I just think that Mostert and Wilson are good. I like Devin Achane. I'd like to see what he could do. Myles Gaskin's just a guy, Salvon Ahmed. I think he's still there. He's not very good. But I think that they have two better running backs whereas the Patriots and Bills and Jets, they don't really have anybody behind their guys. The Bills don't have anybody. James Cook, I don't know if he's ever going to be a 3-down guy. I like his pass catching upside, but I don't know. That's my hot take. I don't dislike Dalvin Cook. That's kind of a combination of me being lower on Cook than most people and higher on Mostert and Wilson than most people.
Fair point. And with that, we'll put the Cook war to rest until Dalvin Cook signs, which knowing us will probably be in like an hour from now. And then
signs with the Dolphins.
Yeah, we'll sign with the Dolphins and render the whole podcast moot, knowing our luck with recording these things. But going on to the hot topic of the day that is not even really related to the on-field product. It is the behind-the-scenes stuff. It's Hard Knocks. So for those that don't know, basically Hard Knocks has a rotating system where every year there's a bunch of different factors in terms of like you can't be on if you have a new coach and a bunch of different you can be on after a certain amount of years. Basically only 4 or 5 teams this year hit all of the criteria needed to appear on the show, the Jets being one of them. And pretty much all of those teams have said we don't want to be on Hard Knocks. I think the Saints were one. They said no. I think the Bears were another one. They said they don't want to. The Jets, being one of the 4 or 5, also do not want to be on Hard Knocks, which is going to give you a behind-the-scenes look at training camp and how they get the team ready and get everything installed. They don't want to be on it. Unnecessary distraction. And I'm kind of with them on that. Even though Dominique Foxworth on First Take this morning said you're a bad coach if it's a distraction. I mean, saying like I
hate June in football. I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah, I mean, all right. If you let it overtake you and ruin your season, yeah, you're a bad coach. But it can still be annoying. It can still be an irritant. And the league also has the power to basically force you to appear on the show. And it seems like they're going to do that with the Jets. And maybe this is just coming from me personally, just my viewing habits. I do not like Hard Knocks at all. Like I just never, not like I detest the idea of the show or its creation. I just don't find it entertaining. So the idea that you're just giving my team, the team that I am hoping can compete for a Super Bowl, another unnecessary distraction just because they have Aaron Rodgers and because they make for good theater, something about it just seems like, oh, like the fact that they're on, it seems like they're trying to mess up, that something's going to get messed up. There's going to be some weird thing that happens in the course of Hard Knocks because the team obviously doesn't have control over the final cut and what it's going to look like. And some quote's going to be taken out of context, or Aaron Rodgers is going to say something about RFK Jr. and it's going to go viral. And it's something that I don't want to happen, or something Jets fans don't want to happen, is going to transpire. I feel like if they get Hard Knocks, which I call me selfish. I don't want that to happen.
See, the thing is, I think it's inevitable. Regardless of whether they're on Hard Knocks or not, the Jets are going to be under a microscope this year because they got Aaron Rodgers, because they have all the preseason hype. Everyone's expecting them to be, legitimately a Super Bowl contender. We were just talking about that. And after over a decade of not even making the playoffs, that means there's going to be a lot of expectations, and people are going to be paying attention to this Jets team. So I think regardless of whether they're on Hard Knocks or not, it's inevitable. I like Hard Knocks. I enjoy watching it. I generally try to watch it each year, at least watch some of it. I don't think it really has a major effect on a team's success. Obviously, the last time the Jets were on Hard Knocks, they made the AFC Championship game. Now, I believe you were talking about this before the show. No team since then that has been on Hard Knocks has won a playoff game.
One team has, the Rams in the COVID year. That was the
one team, sure. But like at the same time, they're also choosing bad teams because, as you mentioned, that criteria for a team being forced to be on the show, they can't have appeared on the show within the last 10 years. They can't have a first-year head coach, but they also can't have made the playoffs in either of the last 2 years. So they're not picking the Chiefs to be on Hard Knocks. The Chiefs would just say no. They don't want to do it. The only teams that can be forced are teams that generally haven't been pretty good recently. So that is probably a bigger correlation in my mind. The NFL generally doesn't like forcing teams, but it isn't unprecedented. They've done it before. The 2019 Raiders, it was Mark Davis came out and said, "Hey, we don't want to be on Hard Knocks," and they were still chosen anyway. Of course, that was the whole Antonio Brown year. There was a lot going on. They had to move to Vegas. There was a lot going on with the Raiders at that time, so they were an obvious pick. The NFL was like, even if you're saying no, we're still picking you because they had the ability to do so. I think it's going to be very similar with the Jets. Like you said, the Saints and the Bears have both publicly said, or I know the Bears have publicly said it. Either the Saints have privately or publicly said that they don't want to appear on it. According to the report from Mike Florio, the Commanders, who are the other of the four teams that can be like forced to do it, are apparently open to it if they're assigned it. Like they're not volunteering, but they're not going to outright say no, which they wouldn't be able to anyway. But they're not outright saying no to it. That said, the NFL wants the Jets. The NFL clearly wants the Jets, and it's obvious. Even aside from Aaron Rodgers, which they can make 75% of the show about Aaron Rodgers, and they probably would. But even aside from that, you have everything going on with Quinn Williams and his extension drama. You have a bunch of really young and charismatic guys on this team, like Sauce Gardner, like Garrett Wilson, even like someone like Michael Carter, I think would thrive on a show like Hard Knocks. You have Mekhi Becton's road to recovery. Everything going on, with Carl Lawson, he's kind of entering a make or break season. More on that later, potentially. There's just so much star power and so much intrigue with this Jets roster that it's so hard to I totally get why the NFL wants them on the show. It seems inevitable that it's going to happen. I'm cool with it. Obviously, I think the biggest detriment for the Jets is that they have their own documentary series, One Jets Drive, which is phenomenal. They do amazing work with that. And so now you're going to have the I don't know if they keep doing that. My guess is they would, but I'm not sure how that, I don't know if HBO would like that. I don't know how they'd go about that. But
One Jets Drive is the superior product. I'm not just saying that to schlep up all the state-run, propaganda here, but I mean, it's a better product.
It's great. They put out a really, really good product. And obviously the big difference, like you just mentioned, is they can kind of curate that and decide what goes out to the public. They're not going to release anything that they don't want to be released. You don't get that privilege on Hard Knocks. Hard Knocks is releasing whatever the hell they want to release.
In fact, they may release more things you don't want to release. That's what like you said, a Quinn and Williams extended drama. It's like, I don't want that on everybody's TV screen. I want that handled, in a negotiation room.
Well, best way to do that is to get it done before training camp. That's the best way to do that. And I think that might happen. But yeah, either way, it's more content, which is always fun, especially for us that, we live on content, we thrive on content. But it could be a distraction at the same time. I don't particularly care. I don't think it's going to have a major impact in the season. And I also think that the headlines are going to be there regardless of whether they're on Hard Knocks.
One thing I hated though is always when they show like people getting cut, because it's like, oh, this is the most heartbreaking moment of your life. Like many of these guys probably aren't going to play football again. So it's like, oh yeah, your football dreams end, and you're going to end up working as like, like a marketing associate in like a year and a half and never play football again. It's like, let's have your demise televised in front of everybody, widescreen, HD. I don't know if I like that.
We got to do a segment like next week or something where we look at, assuming that they're going to be on Hard Knocks, right? Where we look at guys who like pick out players who we think are going to be like the Hard Knocks darlings of the year, right?
Oh, I got one that I actually definitely want to see. Legitimately,
save it for next week.
No, I gotta say it now. I gotta say it.
Who is it?
Michael Clemens.
Oh, for sure. Dude.
I got the league needs to know about this guy. I find it funny too, because it's one thing to have this reputation as like a big scary dude, like to develop that over time, like Ndamukong Suh with the Lions, to like develop this reputation, like to come into the league like that. And everybody, like I remember the Jets did like a little Twitter segment. It was like, who would be with you in a haunted house? It was around like Halloween time, and everybody, the vets and everybody, oh, Michael Clemens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a great shout.
I mean, the voice and the septum piercing, and it's just everything works to make it. He's awesome. I love Michael Clemens. So Leany in chat here has a good idea about, or a good viewpoint, I think, on Hard Knocks, which is when they were on 2010, it was awesome. I don't believe it's a distraction. I would not mind them being on it again. More Jets access, the better. I get that. It's just I don't trust the HBO producers. I know what the HBO producers are looking for, and it's not like to show everybody how great Alan Lazard and Corey Davis are. It's to find drama and intrigue and stir the pot, and that's what I don't need. Especially
exactly. That's fun. I agree with you, Leany. Good.
Well, it's not fun to me because I want the Jets to go 17-0 and win games. I want the headlines to be about how awesome Aaron Rodgers is throwing 4 touchdowns, not he's talking about 9/11 conspiracies with some of the rookies.
Those headlines will come once the season starts. Look, we're gonna get the headlines, those clickbaity, nonsense headlines regardless. Rodgers is going to say something silly, whether it's in a press conference or something. It's going to happen. We know this. It's fine. This is you signed up for this. Like the Jets.
I want less of it to happen. I don't know.
I understand. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah. So before our next segment, though, is no matter if they're on TV or not, if this is a televised competition or not, certain players are going to be in for pivotal seasons, make or break seasons, you could even call them, in terms of their status with the New York Jets. A couple of these guys, like I think it's legitimate to say, like if they stumble even a little bit with this new organizational directive and mindset to keep winning now and build around Aaron Rodgers, I think it's fair to say they're not going to be around in 2023. And the guy who I think immediately stands out as a guy where it's like, you got to get your shit together immediately is Michael Carter. Because Michael Carter, I mean, we're talking about making Michael Carter essentially the 3rd string running back, or maybe even the 4th string running back if they bring in Dalvin Cook. I mean, that's how far his star has fallen. For a guy who, I brought this up a couple of times because it really baffles me. I mean, when he was at North Carolina with Javonte Williams, they had like a little smash and dash thing going on. Michael Carter was the dash of the smash and dash. And he wasn't dashing a lot last year with the Jets. It was a lot of 4-yard twisting runs up the middle. And I know the offensive line was banged up. And I know that Mike LaFleur did some good things, but he never really had the best like running game philosophy. He didn't pick that up from Sean McVay. He got more of Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan's passing traits. So I get that he didn't have the best infrastructure, but I mean, damn, man, 3.5 yards a carry, 3 touchdowns, despite starting a lot and getting a pretty good workload and then eventually getting overtaken by Zonovan Bam Knight, an undrafted rookie who wasn't even particularly good in his own right. I mean, that is not setting you up for success, especially now that Breece Hall, I think it's fair to say, even though he only played 5 games, exceeded expectations. I mean, he hit the ground running immediately and immediately said, I'm a high-end running back in this league, which you don't always get from second-round running backs immediately. So Carter, at his best, Michael Carter is going to be the number 2 running back this year. And even again, that situation is tenuous considering how the Jets have openly courted other running backs. So if you don't get up to, the mid 4s, low 4s in yards per carry, even just to show that efficiency's there, I mean, that'd be curtains for Michael Carter in New York. The offensive Michael Carter. Defensive Michael Carter is fine. Offensive Michael Carter, you got to pick it up, man.
Yeah, yeah, you're definitely not wrong. I'd even say it's a make or break summer for him, even if he, before the season starts, because he needs to show this summer that he can still contribute because he's competing for playing time. And if they sign Dalvin Cook, I think he's competing for a roster spot because if they sign Dalvin Cook, Izzy's not going anywhere. Bannekan is not going anywhere. Assuming that Brees Hall is on the Week 1 roster, which all indications are that he will be, they're not going to carry 5 running backs. So that means either Michael Carter or Zonovan Knight are gone. And whether they trade one of them or just outright release them, one of those guys isn't making the team. So if they sign Cook, yeah, Carter is, I think he's fighting for a roster spot. But absolutely, even if they don't sign Cook, Carter's still fighting for his Jets' future this season. I'm going to go to the defensive side of the ball to a guy who I think maybe other than I think the second person you're going to talk about has more to prove than anybody this season. And it's Carl Lawson. And I absolutely loved the Carl Lawson signing when the Jets made it. It was my favorite move of the entire offseason when they did that. It was 3 years, $45 million they signed him to. Big money deal. He was hopefully expected to be their next big, their next great edge rusher, essentially the best one that they had since John Abraham. And the early signs were really promising. That summer of 2021, he was absolutely tearing it up in training camp. He looked like maybe the best player on the entire Jets roster. And then, of course, he tore his Achilles in that joint practice with the Green Bay Packers. Tragic. It was awful. And he missed his entire first year. Comes back 2022. Recovered, rehab for the entire offseason. Unfortunately, we don't find out until after. I believe we found this out in January, but he suffered a setback at some point during his rehab process. He didn't start running again until a few weeks before training camp. A few weeks. He wasn't even running until a few weeks before training camp. That's ridiculous. And the dude went on to play all 17 games. He had 7 sacks. I think anybody watching him can say that he clearly wasn't fully healthy, and obviously he wasn't because he had only started running a few weeks before training camp, which I'm going to repeat that over and over again because that's ridiculous that the guy played the entire season after that. But clearly he wasn't his same explosive self. I think his power was there, and he was kind of focusing and relying more on his bull rush and his power than the athleticism and the agility that he had showed previously with the Bengals, and that we hoped he was going to show with the Jets. So Carl Lawson's entering the last year of his deal. There was a chance or a possibility, an option for the Jets to cut him this past offseason. They didn't do it. They paid themselves almost $15 million in cap space. They didn't do it because they believe this dude can still be the guy that they signed him to be a couple of off seasons ago, now that he's another year removed from that torn Achilles. But he has to show it, right? He's entering the last year of his deal. They drafted Jermaine Johnson in last year's draft in the first round. They drafted Will McDonald this year. That's 2 first-round edge rushers in back-to-back drafts. You have John Franklin Myers still under contract. You have a guy like Michael Clemens. Maybe they keep Bryce Huff around. There's a lot of guys on that roster that are ready to take snaps from Carl Lawson if the Jets don't want to bring him back. So if he wants any opportunity, any chance to be back in 2024, or even if it's not with the Jets, with another team, he needs to show that he can be that guy again. And I hope he can be, because the dude is awesome. And he was great, like legitimately a great player with the Bengals. And I really, really want to see him do that. So I'm pulling for Carl Lawson. I'm very happy the Jets didn't go through with it and cut him, and they restructured his deal. He basically took a pay cut as well to stay on the roster. So I'm very much looking forward to see what Carl Lawson can do, but definitely a make or break year for him.
I feel like he's doing this year like he signed a 1-year prove-it deal. Because I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, I know Carl Lawson had some pedigree with Cincinnati, but like if he was entering the free agent market, he's going to be he's going to turn 28 actually tomorrow. Actually, so
yeah, happy birthday,
happy birthday, Carl Lawson. He's 28, yeah. So he's going to be a 28-year-old player with. He had some concerns, I think, with injuries in college. Now he's got an Achilles tear, and he had 5 sacks last season. 7 sacks last season. Yeah. So, I mean, 7 sacks in 2 years on Achilles tear is not really going to get you a big money deal. So I think he's doing it as, all right, let me just go in, let me get my 8-9 sacks, and then we'll reevaluate my NFL future after this year. I'm going to go back to the offensive side of the ball again in terms of guys who are really in a make or break year. And I mean, boy, oh boy, I mean, this guy right here, taking make or break literally because his body was broken down the last couple of years, is Mekhi Becton, the presumptive right tackle, against his wishes, because he said, I am a left tackle, till he's blue in the face because he wants to play left tackle for some ungodly reason. I mean, even though
I get why he wants to play left tackle. I mean, every tackle wants to play left tackle,
Well, and play a home game in front of fans before your 4th year, and you may get that sort of leeway and that sort of leverage to make demands like that. Again, we may criticize Mekhi Becton a little bit. We want him to do well. We think that he can be really good when he's healthy. He's shown he can be good when he's healthy. He's just he has the last 2 years have been complete washes. for Mekhi Becton. So because of that, any sort of status he had within the organization and within the offense has been completely washed away. He has nothing guaranteed right now. And he's just, this is going to sound simple and sounds like a way to just reduce the argument to something, but I mean, he's got to step up. He's got to figure out a way to stay on the field. And I know you can't predict injuries and things like that. You can't, but Mekhi Becton's just at a position now where all of the giving him a grace period, that's all gone. You got to come in. You got to be a bulldozer in the running game. You got to come in and you got to just shut people down as a right tackle, as a pass blocking right tackle. Hard to do, especially because he was a left tackle coming in. I always played right tackle in college. But I mean, God, that was like 2018, 2019. I mean, can we really take that as face value? He's going to go play that again after 5 years. I don't really buy that right now. So a lot of question marks around Mekhi Becton and a lot of things this offseason that I wish he probably, I think, should have handled differently in terms of how he's voiced his frustration with the last couple of years. Because, of course, you'd be frustrated. You're a football player, and your body's preventing you from playing football, often through no fault of your own. Like, I get that you're pissed off, but you know what? Channel that rage, that vitriol, that vinegar that you got here, and just put it towards being the best right tackle you can be. Don't go tweeting weird stuff. Just go and play. Not to sound like dumb radio guy, but that's really sometimes dumb radio guy axioms apply here. I think it applies to Mekhi Becton.
I feel like I'm talking to Boomer Esiason again. What the hell's going on?
I'm talking to like a caller from Massapequa or something like that.
Yeah, like I'll defend Becton a little bit. Oh, you're totally right. First of all, that I agree. I think more than any player on the roster, he's entering a make or break season this year. Obviously, the Jets declined his fifth-year option, so he is a free agent at the end of the year. It all comes down to this season, not only for his Jets future, but for the future of the entire or of his entire career, I'd say. But I'll defend him a little bit and say that, I mean, the dude has channeled that anger and that frustration into, legitimate positive things, for lack of a better term. He's down over 50 pounds. He's down to, I think it was like 342 was the last we had heard. So he's in
imagine losing 50 pounds and still weighing 342 pounds.
Hey, it was the dude's massive, right? It was necessary. And obviously he seems to be in great shape. Hopefully he can channel that onto the field. And I very much hope he stays healthy, not only for the Jets' sake, because I do think that he's pretty much the key to that offensive line. I think that the ceiling of this Jets offensive line is almost solely dependent on Mekhi Becton, but also for him, because I want to see him succeed. I want to see him do well. Josh Kerr says something interesting in chat that we could talk about real quick before I get into my final player. He said, is Zach Wilson a make or break? What does he have to prove this season? Is there anything he can do to further lose favor with the organization? I mean, the last part,
they're pretty pissed at him right now, Josh.
I mean, yes, but also I don't know if he's going to really be given the opportunity to prove much. It's really just kind of what he's doing behind the scenes, what he's doing off the field, which it seems like he's doing everything right. You know, he this entire offseason, he's basically been kind of keeping himself quiet. We didn't really hear from him at all until OTAs, and then he said all the right things when talking to media. That's really all he can do. All he can do is just put in the work behind the scenes, try to continue to better himself. We'll see him a little bit, or a lot probably, in the preseason. Maybe he'll show some signs of improvement then. I don't know. But either way, he's likely on the roster next year because he's still under contract. They're going to decline his fifth-year option, barring anything completely unforeseen happening. So he basically, I would say that he's a 2-year make or break kind of project, right? Like he has 2 years to prove that maybe he can still be salvaged, or maybe he can still salvage an NFL career. But for this season specifically, I think he's still got a little bit more time, at least, since he's not going to be thrust into the starting lineup. Hopefully, right? That's what we can hope.
Right. And my quick thought on Zach Wilson before you get to your final player is like, I'm out on him as a starting quarterback. I think that's not an unreasonable take, but I understand maybe a guy like Nathaniel Hackett come in and be like, all right, I know guys get overdrafted sometimes, but like this guy's got a cannon for an armor, was a consensus number 2 pick in a year where he probably would have gone number 1 in most drafts, so they didn't have like generational Trevor Lawrence ahead of him. It's like, he can't be this bad. Like there's no way he can be this bad. So I could at least see somebody taking some sort of extra effort to try to make something out of nothing here.
For sure. My last player, I'm going back to defense. So I'm doing 2 defensive players. You did 2 offensive players. I'm doing a player that we've definitely criticized quite a bit on this show. And I've definitely, I've talked about how I honestly wish the Jets maybe made more of an effort to replace him this offseason, but they didn't. It's Jordan Whitehead. I'm rolling with Jordan Whitehead, another guy who was entering the last year of his deal. The Jets signed him away from the Buccaneers, and they kind of knew somewhat of the player they were getting. They knew they were getting a player who can bring that physicality on defense, who can kind of be an enforcer in the back end of their secondary. But they also knew he had some weaknesses. He had missed tackle issues in Tampa Bay. His coverage has never been his calling card, his strength. But I'd still say, even knowing that, his first season with the Jets was a disappointment. And maybe part of that was playing alongside LaMarcus Joyner, who was not better. He was worse than Jordan Whitehead, but also you had two great cornerbacks. So I think that kind of evens itself out. Jordan Whitehead was a weakness of the Jets defense last season. I don't think he was a terrible safety. I think there were a lot worse out there. I think LaMarcus Joyner was one of those, but he was a below average starter last season, specifically when it comes to tackling. And that's something that, again, we knew was an issue coming from Tampa Bay, but I think it became even more of an issue with the Jets. He had a 15.6% missed tackle rate last year, which among qualified safeties was the fourth worst, I believe. So that's bad. Like that's really bad if that's the case. And obviously, I think the Jets already have some issues maybe with their linebackers were tackling, so it was kind of amplified even more. They went out and traded for Chuck Clark, and I loved that move at the time. It was I called it a few weeks ago my favorite move of the entire offseason, or my favorite value move that the Jets had made. Unfortunately, Chuck Clark is now out for the season, very likely. He tore his ACL. So they went out and signed Adrian Amos. I think Amos is fine. He's a good player. He will start alongside Jordan Whitehead. They're both they're both in a similar spot because they're both coming off disappointing seasons. I'd like to see both of them rebound, but specifically for Whitehead, I think this is even more important for him because, I mean, the guy is still young. What is he, 26? Really quickly looking it up. Should have had that pulled up. He's 26. So
Yes.
there you go, right? Like I somehow knew it. But he's entering the last year of his deal, but he's still very young. There's no reason why, if he doesn't play well, or if he plays well this year, the Jets couldn't look to bring him back. Like they totally could do that. I know he's, and they also they restructured his deal, so he already has, I think, $3 million in dead cap after this, or something like that, with deferring payments to future years. But I would totally like to see if he can rebound this year and actually play well, right? And be a more consistent player in the back of that defense, be more consistent in coverage, be more consistent as a tackler. The Jets can totally bring him back. So I think Jordan Whitehead's a good shout here alongside Carl Lawson. He doesn't necessarily get the publicity and the attention that someone like Lawson does, but I think he's an important part of this defense because the Jets safeties need to be better this year. And that starts with Jordan Whitehead.
Tampa Whitehead, I think, is there. Now, Tampa Whitehead wasn't perfect, but it was certainly better than Jets Whitehead. He's in there. You just need the right combination of coaching motivation to get it out of him. So we're going to close this show with another fun little thought exercise. We want to go get your thoughts on this too, because Jets have not given us a ton to root for and celebrate over the last couple of years, but they have given us plenty of hateable figures that have permeated the AFC East and Jets fandom. And a couple, at least this is just me personally, that they really stick out. I know there's a generation divide here specifically, and we're younger guys, so we're obviously, I think, going to be a lot more New England slanted, just because, like, I can remember sitting at a Jets game and hearing a guy just euphorically excited that the Dolphins were getting killed. They were playing the Jets. The Jets were playing, like, I think, Carolina or something like that. But the Dolphins were getting killed, and he was thrilled. And I go, man, you're really even more happy than the Patriots? You hate the Dolphins more than the Patriots? He goes, and like with steely, like war veteran eyes, like fortunate son playing in the back.
He'd seen some stuff.
He just goes, you weren't here for Marino, man. So I can get that if you're that old, you probably hate Dan Marino more. And if you're probably in between that, you probably hate Jim Kelly more. Like I can get all that. But the amount of misery that Tom Brady has wrecked on my life, not in some like big existential way, but how he constantly ruins my Sundays. 1/7 of the week consistently ruined by Thomas Edward Patrick Brady Jr. for 20 years. I mean, I knew he had to be an easy number one, because it's like we were saying earlier, it's like if somebody said name a diver, of course everybody would say Greg Louganis or something like that. It'd always be the one. If you said name somebody Jets fans hate, I mean, Tom Brady had to be the one. I mean, this was an anomaly of hating. It was so goddamn infuriating for 20 years. The other thing too, they're actually kind of even in my mind, is him and Julian Edelman, because Julian Edelman, like at least with Tom Brady, like he was playing quarterback at such a high level for so long that like it's impossible to not be like, all right, this is at least cool to see, like just to see him do it for this long and at this high a level, like it's unprecedented. Like we're not going to see that happen again. I don't think in like the way that he did it. So it's at least you got to at least marvel at the historical moment you're looking at. Like Julian Edelman, if you look at his numbers, I believe he only had what 2,000-yard seasons in his entire 11-year career. Sorry, 3.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Never more than 1,117 yards.
Wait, but is he a Hall of Famer, Mike?
Oh, that's the thing. Oh, he broke a record that Jerry Rice. Are you telling me right now he's Jerry Rice?
He won so many Super Bowls, man. He's got to be a Hall of Famer.
But the other thing too is the thing that why the Patriots fans, even though Miami fans are kind of annoying and Buffalo had their moment, like the reason that New England fans and Boston fans in general will always be at the top of my proverbial shit list is the fact that they constantly. I mean, what sports city has won more than Boston in the last 20 years? None. They always have it. If the Patriots stink like recently, the Bruins are good, or the Celtics are good, or the Red Sox are terrible for like 1 year, and then they flip it and win the World Series. Like they have just had this perfect sports city environment for decades, and they always play this like nobody believed in us. We're the underdogs, because like one person will say something moderately critical like on ESPN. I don't think the Patriots are that good this year. And then, oh, nobody believed in us. Like, it's just so phony. And it drove me nuts. And I know that I'm sounding triggered right now. I get it. I probably am. But I mean, if you're not, are you really not a Jets fan? If that stuff doesn't bubble up some rancor in you?
So I'm with you, by the way. Obviously, I think Brady is definitely at the top of most Jets fans' list. I want to really quick explain what sparked this segment for me, because I don't know how many people watching this know. I know you know this, Mike. I'm a big pro wrestling fan, right? So my worlds kind of collided where it was two WWE wrestlers were on First Take the other day, and they were listing off their like top 5 biggest heels or, bad guys in the sports world. And Seth Rollins, who's one of the WWE wrestlers, who happens to be a Chicago Bears fan, listed Aaron Rodgers as number 1, as the biggest heel in all sports. And I get that. Obviously, from a Bears fan, I definitely get that. So I thought it'd be fun. Well, let's talk about the biggest heels in Jets history. And I do really quickly want to answer a question from Josh Kerr in chat, because he comes out and he says, can a Jets player be a Jets enemy? He says, if so, it's Muhammad Wilkerson. I hated him at the end of his time with us. That's a great shout. And absolutely, yes. There have been heels. There have been bad guys in the Jets world who were members of the Jets, whether they're players, whether they're coaches, whoever. If we're doing this draft style, if I can't choose who you've already chosen, which by the way, I wouldn't have said Brady is number 1. Brady, I don't think.
How could you not?
Because I don't think Tom Brady is the number 1 hated figure for Jets fans, at least not for me. It's Bill Belichick. That's who number 1 is. I think
all right.
Brady, because he has that history with the organization, and because more so than Brady, throughout his entire career, his entire freaking life, he has made it a point to just get back at the Jets and to just continuously try and screw them over. He literally did it in April. Where he traded now with the Pittsburgh Steelers, took a lesser deal with the Steelers because he thought the Steelers were to take the guy, Broderick Jones, who the Jets were targeting, which that didn't end up being the case, but that's what he believed. He did that because he specifically wanted to screw over the Jets. I don't think I need to go into detail about Bill Belichick's history with the Jets, but of course, former assistant with the team. He was going to be the head coach, sort of was for like a day.
Literally a day.
Yeah, literally a day. And then obviously that didn't end up happening. And he goes on for 2 decades to torment the organization every step of the way. I think he has tormented the Jets more than any individual that's ever existed in sports, in anything. He has tormented this organization more than Tom Brady, more than Dan Marino, more than Julian Edelman, more than anybody. So Bill Belichick, I think, would be the number 1 heel, the number 1 bad guy, the foil, the enemy of the Jets organization.
He's up there. I think for some reason, maybe this is just me. I always hated Brady more. But I think also, part of it too was like I get that Brady, like at least Belichick too, like he just had this way about, like, I know it was irritating, but like he had this fear factor in you where you're like, oh geez, we gotta go. It felt like we gotta go play Bill Belichick. That's always what I felt like would always freaked me out more. Like
It's still
Brady
like that.
felt
That's
like
still a
Brady
thing.
was an avatar of Belichick that he was destroying the Jets through.
Exactly. Brady was
Yeah.
a subset of Belichick, right? Obviously a significant subset, but
Yeah.
he was the a minion that Belichick deployed to torment the Jets. Belichick's the evil mastermind.
The thing that I maybe this is a completely personal opinion too. Like one thing that always drove me a little nuts about Brady, and I think kind of contributed to some of the hate, is like I think just aesthetically, like with Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, they would make these throws where you're like, okay, like you just got to hand it up to him. Like
Mhm.
Tom Brady had this like soulless, joyless, methodical way where he just went 31-14 every game, but it just looked like I'm going to be super precise and super. Like I could see why just watching that would be really demoralizing. Like I got a younger brother, he's 7. I would rather watch him and his friend play jacks than watch Tom Brady play quarterback
Do kids
from an
play
aesthetic
jacks?
point of
Do
view.
kids still play jacks? Is that a thing?
I would watch it over that. Like it was this soulless, like methodical way that they played football. That's what drove me nuts. Like even I know some Jets fans would hate Dan Marino, but like Dan Marino was probably like the Rodgers of his time, just flicking it 60 yards. I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. Dan Marino was kind of cool. Tom Brady was not, and I think that too. It's like, oh, we're letting this guy every single year. Like no one can ever get a sack on him. No one can ever do anything. Okay, that's what always drove me crazy.
I think the idea of Brady bothers people more than Brady himself because I feel like Tom Brady is not the most unlikable person.
I feel
That's
like he's a
maybe that's
normal guy.
Yeah, maybe that's a hot take. Bill Belichick's a miserable dude, right? He's a miserable dude who takes every opportunity to shit on the Jets. Every chance he gets, he shits on the Jets, whether it's actually, verbally or if it's literally using his actions to try and get one over on the team. He would specifically sign former Jets players because he wanted to get back at them. That was a thing that he did, and it still happens. I think I got to
He
put him
also
up.
had the latitude to do that because he lucked into Brady. So
Sure, and then maybe that makes him more despicable. I don't know. If we're still doing like draft style, whatever. Obviously, Dan Marino's up there. I'd also throw Don Shula in there because again, we didn't grow up with that, but that's the coach of those Dolphins teams. Those Dolphins teams that dominated the Jets for a decade plus. Obviously led by Marino, but also led by Don Shula as well was a obviously significant part of that. If we're talking Jets guys, I have a whole big board that I literally made for the show, by the way, of people that are on like the heel list, the bad guy list. If we're talking Jets people in the Jets organization, I think you got to talk Adam Gase. Like,
it's gotta be. I mean, it's
how
gotta
do you
be.
not talk Adam Gase and Rich Kotite for that matter? Again, also before our time, but just the worst two coaches in Jets history.
Rich Kotite seemed to be more like not silly incompetent, but like in the way where you watch like a movie about a bad football team, like
Yeah,
Major League, and like he's the coach, where it's like
he's
it's
clueless.
almost like it's like more pathetic. Like Adam Gase was annoying and irritating. I think
Adam
that
Gase,
puts him over
I
Kotite.
think Adam Gase was so bad because he also ruined what looked like the start of an actual potentially like promising core. It's very, it's a very common take, and I agree with it that he ruined Sam Darnold, or at least had a large part in Sam Darnold's failures in New York. And so that obviously partially plays a role in it. Also, like he wasn't the most liked guy by any means as well by Jets players, but like it's not like he was just some lovable loser like that. Not that he's a terrible person, but he had his fair share of spats with guys like Le'Veon Bell. Obviously, another guy he had a spat with, who I also have on my list, Jamal Adams. I look, and obviously, I think time will heal more wounds with that. Time heals all wounds, and I think with Jamal Adams, that'll definitely be the case, especially because the Jets unloaded him and got a haul in return. I mean, thanks to
He's
Jamal
doing
Adams,
fine in Seattle. He got his money in Seattle. He's
he
doing
did. No,
okay.
I'm happy for him, legitimately. But thanks to Jamal Adams, the Jets didn't have to pay him a ridiculous amount of money for a player who has definitely not been anywhere near as good as he was with the Jets. He's also had injury troubles, but they got Garrett Wilson, they got Elijah Vera Tucker. So it's hard to like fully hate on Adams, but obviously, I think if we're talking recent memory, he's got to be high on that list as well.
He's got to be. The thing too with Gase is every minor thing was so unnecessarily combative.
Yeah,
Like just basic questions about how the team operate. Why do you care? I'm not going to tell you. Like he just had to, I mean, the media didn't like him, players didn't like him. The one funny moment I have at Adam Gase is remember when he said he like didn't go to Thanksgiving to game plan for the
yeah,
0-11 Bengals and got blown out. Like
yep, yep.
it's this guy who thinks he invented football. That's the thing. And again, like I don't believe that he has zero football knowledge and he just get like nepotism and like networked his way into this job, but like he just couldn't believe that his crap didn't stink. He just thought he was infallible. And if anybody challenged on basic things, who's calling the plays? Will this player be active? Where's this player going to play? What did you say to Sam Darnold, your starting quarterback and allegedly at the time franchise quarterback? Like basic things, he just couldn't answer. It was really strange because I mean, Miami, he had some of that, but nothing, not like this. The Jets got the worst of Adam Gase.
They did that 2019, 2020 Jets teams, those 2 years of Jets are the most miserable Jets teams I've ever watched. And I didn't get to see the Rich Kotite years, but I generally believe that I think even fans that watch those Kotite years would compare the Gase years to the Kotite years, if not worse. It was just
they could have made the playoffs and been miserable. That's how bad it was.
They went 7-9 Gase's first year, and that was a horrible season. That was just a miserable year. It took all of the fun out of watching football. Jets fans were rooting for their team to lose every single week and upset when they won. Like it just took all the fun out of the Jets. And it's kind of easy-ish to forget about it now because generally times are pretty good right now. But man, that was rough. And Adam Gase is the face of those years of the Jets. Like that's why I think he definitely belongs high on this list. I don't know about you. I have a couple of personal ones as well.
One last thing, though, it didn't even work because they didn't get Trevor Lawrence, so it didn't even work.
You're right. If they got Trevor Lawrence, totally different. And that's obviously, they ended up with Aaron Rodgers a few years later anyway. But regardless, if they
were trying to get Trevor Lawrence, and they did that.
And if they ended up with Trevor Lawrence, I think that Jets fans might see the Gase era as different because it'd be a failure, but also a success. But they didn't even tank right, if you want to look at it that way. A couple of quick personal ones that not as much personal with the first one, but I think just one of those guys who consistently annoying and always seem to have good games against the Jets, Stevie Johnson.
Oh, the one guy Revis couldn't cover.
Exactly. I think Johnson deserves a shout out. I wouldn't put him amongst the biggest foils in Jets history, but I think at least in my era growing up, that was one of those guys I was like, God, I just hate him. I just hate playing against this dude.
Because he always had crappy quarter, Trent Edwards and stuff like that.
EJ Manuel later, I think he played with. It's just bad. It was bad. And then one more, and this one I feel bad because I got nothing against it was a person or whatever, and it's one specific play. It's my biggest nightmare in my Jets watching career that I've been like a true fan watching, and it's Kenbrell Tompkins. I'm sorry to Kenbrell Tompkins.
Caught that ball at some point.
I am so sorry to Kenbrell Tompkins because I'm sure he's a wonderful human being, but man, he is responsible for one of the biggest letdowns I've ever had watching a sports team. Of course, 2015, they're 10-5 entering week 6 or week 17, playing the Bills, and unfortunately, Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Jets couldn't get it done, and it's because Kenbrell Tompkins had it. He had it in his hands. If he catches that pass, that long pass down the sideline, if he catches that, the Jets likely win that game, make the playoffs, and who knows what happens because that was a really good Jets team. But Patrick was playing really well. You had Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker. It was a damn good team. And unfortunately, it was literally all downhill after that. After that play, we had 7-8 years of misery, and it's still up until today, just finally recovering. So that I got to shout out
too. He had his moment in New England.
And he did.
I still think that, look, I'm not saying that this is 100% true, but I mean, if you told me that Bill Belichick was like, all right, we're going to send Kenbrell to New York as some sort of covert, a mole, if you told me that happened, I'd be like, all right, I believe that. It would not surprise me. Maybe it's just me. Edelman too, and Danny Amendola also.
Yeah, that's a good.
There's just something about
Wes Welker too. Wes Welker even before them.
Not even that. Wes Welker was really, really good.
He was.
Wes Welker was, in my opinion, twice the receiver Julian Edelman ever was. So at least
he tormented the Jets. I agree.
I can at least say, all right, it's like when Randy Moss was cooking the Jets. I'm like, all right, he's Randy Moss. He's really good. Julian Edelman, I just felt like how can nobody cover this dude? It drove me nuts. Danny Woodhead was like that too. Also, we're
yeah,
maybe it's the physical thing where these little tiny 5'9.5" guys who aren't fast, and we're just how can this entire team not in 5 years figure out how to guard any of them?
I can never hate Danny Woodhead though, because he started with the Jets. He obviously, he is an underdog, more so I think than everyone else. So I can never hate Danny Woodhead though. But I think, do I have anyone else on my list? Other guys I didn't mention, John Idzik, I think more recently, it's got to be up there.
Again, he's in the co-type thing where it's like more pathetic than
for the damage
irritating.
he did. Tremaine Johnson as well, more recently as well, just kind of had a huge contract. Was, I believe at the time, the highest paid player in Jets history.
5-year deal.
A complete dud.
5-year deal.
And then obviously Jim Kelly. I also put Jason Taylor on there as well, just for years of tormenting the Jets with the Dolphins. He, I think, has maybe more sacks than anybody against the Jets. Oh, Bruce Smith, I think, probably.
Bruce Smith, but again, like
he's probably second behind Bruce Smith, but still, Bruce Smith's another guy. He tormented the Jets with the Bills.
Yeah, but again, but Bruce Smith was better than Jason Taylor. Bruce Smith is still probably like a top 5 defensive end ever. So, and Jason Taylor's great in his own right, but like, yeah. I didn't live through those, the Bills teams. They went to 4 straight Super Bowls. I can imagine why they'd be irritating, because that the whole K-gun and this wide open crazy offense. Like, I can get why watching them score 35 was irritating. Yeah. But I mean, nothing will top. Not even Brady at the end of his career was more irritating. Like the 39, 40 years. It was like the late 2000s and early 2010s Patriots. Those were the most annoying. I don't know why. I think is like they just didn't have like the offensive pieces. Like at the beginning of his career and the end of his career, Brady had the best support around him. So and then once Moss left, so after Moss, like Gronk before he was Gronk, like his rookie
Aaron
year.
Hernandez.
Aaron Hernandez. Yeah, we all know how that story resolved itself. But I mean, he had a couple years too where he would have been on this list if not for personal choices. But he had because that was the year where they went to the Super Bowl and lost by the Giants, was like his coming out party. But they never had receivers except for little shit and Julian Edelman and little Danny Amendola, who could not beat you or me in a foot race.
Welker was still there at that time. No, when Welker left in like 2014, right?
Welker, yeah.
2012 was his last year with the Patriots.
Yeah, because then he went to Denver with Peyton. So
he played 8 games with the Rams. Didn't remember that.
Oh yeah, that was like when he was really.
The end of his last year.
I was like, dude, hanging up. It's over, Wes.
Yeah, I did not remember that. I would love to hear what other people have to say. If we missed, because obviously we're both kind of from the same generation here,
right?
So we might have missed maybe like the Heidi game. Maybe the movie Heidi is your biggest enemy in Jets history. I don't know.
What, like the NBC network producers?
Yeah, the NBC network for airing that movie. I don't know.
Ooh, I got a good one.
Who?
AJ Dewey.
Oh, AJ Dewey. What? I know
that was that Mud Bowl game when they played in the AFC Championship, and Richard Todd threw 5 picks, and it never rains in Florida, so let's not put a tarp down.
Yeah, well, that also is like the grounds crew could be like, because wasn't there like a thing with the grounds crew that they didn't? We should know this.
Yeah, because it doesn't rain in Florida. They didn't put the tarp down, and then AJ Dewey, who had like 5 picks in his career, got 3 off of Richard Todd. In the AFC Championship game.
We could say the Dolphins grounds crew could also be on there. There's plenty of older ones too.
I believe too that was the year David Woodley was the quarterback, who I believe is still the worst quarterback to ever play in a Super Bowl. David Woodley.
Wow.
Him and Rex Grossman are there. So I mean, that was the year I think the Redskins beat him that year. But I mean, that Jets team would have given him, I think, a little bit better of a run for their money than Miami did.
Imagine that he went so they went 11-3-1 with Woodley a quarterback in 81. He threw 12 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. Imagine that happening now.
That was just Don Shula. It was run the ball and slow in defense. I mean, it worked. It
did work. But yeah, I would love to hear what other people have to say. I think Belichick's top for me. I don't think anything touches Belichick. But Brady's obviously pretty close.
Yeah, I think so, but nothing will top Tom Brady. So let us know maybe in a Apple review what you think. Maybe your biggest Jets enemy, or you could just say you're following instructions and directions, whatever you want. It's just to get us up those Apple charts. You could always find us on there and on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, wherever it is that you may get your podcast. We're over there. We're also on YouTube at the Jet Press. You can subscribe there. You can hit that little bell so you get notified whenever we go live. Take us home, Justin.
Yes, sir. Really quick before we go, we just launched a TikTok as well. I'm very new to the world of TikTok, so it's an experience, but definitely go out and follow us over on TikTok if you haven't already. But yeah, man, this is fun. I'm really glad we did that. That was a really fun time.
I needed to exercise some demons and yell about Kembrell Tompkins.
Yeah, dude, if there's one thing Jets fans can do, it's complain and just, just reminisce on bad past experiences because there's been a lot of them. Anyway, though, thank you all for joining us on the show today. You can follow Mike on Twitter at @ByMikeLuciano. You can follow me on Twitter at Justin T. Freed. Follow the Jet Press at the Jet Press. You can download the Jet Press podcast wherever you guys get your podcast. Also, check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, like, hit that notification bell. You all know what to do. We stream live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you all for listening to the Jet Press podcast. I've been Justin Freed. That has been Mike Luciano. See you guys next time.
See you folks next week.